Welcome to the Chief Strategy Officer podcast, a collaborative space for the architects of corporate success, chief strategy officers. In today's interconnected world, no single leader has all the answers. Here, we foster a platform for knowledge exchange where executives who lead strategy can share their unique experiences in tackling complex challenges, navigating disruptive technologies, and driving impactful growth. The CSO role can be lonely and misunderstood, but what if there was a network dedicated to your success? Outthinker Network provides a supportive community of leading chief strategy officers offering time-saving solutions, trend insights, and invaluable peer connections. Visit outthinkernetwork.com to unlock the full potential of your role.
Welcome to another episode of the Chief Strategy Officer podcast. Today we are diving into a crucial and increasingly relevant topic, the intersection of sustainability and corporate strategy. As businesses face mounting pressure to address environmental and social issues, the role of sustainability in shaping strategic decisions has never been more critical. In this episode, we are joined by three Chief Strategy Officers who are also responsible for sustainability in their organizations. Alpa Sutaria of WestRock, Paula Kovarsky of Raizen, and Maisie Ganzler of Apetit Management Company. In this episode, we explore why companies might choose to make sustainability a core responsibility of their strategy officers. We'll discuss the benefits of integrating sustainability into the strategic framework and examine the challenges that come with this responsibility. Our expert guests share insights on overcoming these hurdles, offering practical advice and innovative solutions. Some of the quick questions we address include: when and why should sustainability be a strategic priority for their companies? What are the main challenges when incorporating sustainability into their strategies? How can companies effectively balance short-term financial goals with long-term sustainability objectives? Where should a chief strategy officer start if their organization is considering making sustainability a part of their role? Join us as we uncover the strategies and mindsets of organizations where sustainability is not just a buzzword, but a vital component of success. Welcome, Paula, Alpa, and Maisie to the Chief Strategy Officer podcast. Thank you for joining us today. To start, can you please briefly introduce yourselves and companies to the audience?
Let me introduce myself quickly. So I'm Paula Kovarsky, Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer at Raizen. I'm also responsible for M&A and a biogas business unit. Raizen is a very, very large company. It's the third largest company in Brazil in revenues. First global producer of sugarcane-based ethanol and sugar. Second largest fuels distributor in Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. We have the largest part commercialization company in Brazil, and we are a very highly integrated company reshaping the future of energy. That's our goal.
That's great. So, Alpa, and we finalize with Maisie.
Thank you for having us today. So my name's Alpa Sutaria. I work for WestRock, which is one of the largest paper and packaging companies in the world today. We are based in the US, but actually have operations across North America, different parts of South America, as well as operations in Europe and some also in Asia Pacific. Paper and packaging is not something people think about every day, but it is actually all around us. And we make everything from paper that is converted, secondary converters around the world, as well as all of the different types of corrugated packaging that people find in their life. So everything from mailers to pizza boxes to large shipping packaging. But we also make a full range of consumer packaging out of paper. So if you buy things from the drugstore or food or beverage, chances are you've encountered some of our packaging somewhere. And we are a fully integrated company. So we procure trees, we make paper, we recycle paper, we make that packaging. We work with our customers to try to find ways to help them be more sustainable also.
Thank you so much, Alpa. So let's go to Maisie.
Also very happy to be here. I'm Maisie Ganzler, and I'm the former Chief Strategy and Brand Officer for Apetit Management Company. Apetit is a full food service management company running on-site restaurants for corporations, private colleges and universities, and specialty venues. And I was lucky enough to retire in February and release a book called You Can't Market Manure at Lunchtime and Other Lessons from the Food Industry for Creating a More Sustainable Company. It's a practical how-to guide on how to create any brand based on a value like sustainability or whatever value is important to you.
That's great. So all connected with sustainability and the strategy here, that is the topic, the key topic of this podcast. So I have a first question that is, when we see sustainability in different organizations, that goes to so many different areas. Some organizations have an independent executive taking care of that. Some organizations in HR, some organizations in communication. So I want to understand a little bit the journey for each of your companies, in your case, Maisie, for the company that you used to work for. How did sustainability got together with strategy? So just to understand the origins of this arrangement that you have in your organization. We could start with Alpa. Alpa, if you could just share with you how that happened for you specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So sustainability in the paper and packaging industry has been a topic of importance for many, many years because we deal with natural resources and making sure that we're procuring, for example, trees from healthy forests that are not creating deforestation. But I would say in the last 10 years or so, there's been an increasing importance, and WestRock for sure. There was more and more recognition that we wanted to not only continue to do all the right things inside of our organization to be more sustainable, whether it was reducing emissions or, managing forestry or, protecting water resources and many other things, but also how do we actually create the value for the enterprise and for our customers as we go through that. So several years ago, as we were going through, corporate, I would say a little bit of a transformation moment, the decision was made to bring strategy and sustainability together at the leadership level. And really the thought process was that we wanted to really inject sustainability into the core purpose and the value that our company was bringing to all of its constituents internally and externally. And so that's really how those two, what was previously disparate disciplines came together in the organization. So I have responsibility for both sides, and we have many people that work with us throughout the organization, whether it's in operations or finance or technical sustainability or commercial leadership, to really make sure that what we're saying is actually being executed across our business, and we're finding ways to articulate that value for our stakeholders.
Thank you, Alpa. Paula, how is that story for you?
This is a very interesting case for us because Raizen was formed back in 2011, and it's actually a joint venture between Shell, goes without saying, and Cosan, which is one of the largest conglomerates in Brazil, with its origins in the sugarcane business. And it was actually, so the JV was essentially formed because Shell wanted a green upstream, and Cosan wanted to see the sugarcane business integrated downstream, because our sugarcane business produces sugar and ethanol. And ethanol in Brazil in particular is very, very, very connected to the light fleet blending and therefore to fuels distribution, right? But the whole point was, one, create a green upstream, two, better monetize the green attribute of our ethanol on top of the sugar value, right? And so the company was formed backed on those terms. Fast forward, the company grew quite significantly, adding, power generation, which is cogeneration within the sugar mills, and then developing second generation ethanol. We're actually the only company globally that managed to design and develop cellulosic ethanol at scale. We are now with the second plant running, the largest globally. And so we decided to take the company public in 2021. And the investment thesis was, 100% grounded on, the role of sugarcane in reshaping the future of energy and the role of sugarcane in producing and scaling up renewable fuels opportunities globally. At that point, I was still at Cosan, at the holding, dealing with sustainability and actually defining and designing the whole sustainability strategy of the holding. And then as we decided to IPO Raizen, we said, you know what? Day after, we want to make sure everything we mentioned to the market is actually, we're walking our talk. So blending together strategy and sustainability was almost a response to the market, right? Or reinforcing our commitment that we were, indeed walking the talk of the promises that we released to the market throughout the IPO process. And then I also have M&A bonded with strategy to make sure that we deal with the portfolio, taking all of the sustainability aspects into consideration. And also because the more we expanded our product baseline, so from sugar and ethanol to then cogeneration and electricity, and then now the second generation ethanol producing biomethane out of vinasse, which is a byproduct of ethanol production, and eventually taking one step further and going into sustainable aviation fuel out of ethanol, chemicals out of ethanol, and maritime fuels out of ethanol and out of the bagasse and so on. It's very important that we have, I'm going to exaggerate the point to make the point here, but it's very important that we have a commercial sustainability team, because when we go pitch our customers, right, we have to have the technical background to explain why the products that we are selling do command a different type of pricing, and how do we assure that the sustainable attribute is indeed embedded in everything we do. So we really had to strengthen this sustainability team beyond the kind of old concept of a sustainability team. They have to have the technical and the commercial background, because at the end of the day, we need our products to also be economically sustainable. And so they're very much part of the day-to-day work and operations with, the commercial teams and the operational teams. So in our case, it made all the sense to have, all those things together. And of course, part of the C-level of the company and the senior decision-making process.
That's amazing. It looks like we have two companies where strategy is at the core of value creation here in this case. And I think it's not different for you, Maisie, and I would love to hear your story at Bon Appetit. I had the opportunity to read a big piece of your book, so if you could just share this experience, how strategies sit together with sustainability in your case.
Well, I loved what Alpa and Paula had to say about really tying sustainability into the business in a deep way. And that's what we did at Bon Appetit. In fact, we created our total go-to-market strategy based on sustainability. And at the time, we called it a strategic initiative, but it was the largest strategic initiative. And that's how my role grew, starting from being a VP of strategic initiatives, moving up to the C-level over a period of about 20 years, specifically working on sustainability, but never with the word sustainability in my title or in anybody else's title. I think when you have a sustainability department, and Paula talked about the old type of sustainability, the old way of looking at it, when you have a sustainability department that operates by itself, it can often become siloed and become one of two things. Either it's a purely compliance-focused department that's simply doing reporting and doesn't have any ability to really affect change in operations, or it becomes almost like philanthropy of it's a nice to do thing around sustainability. And for Bon Appetit, when we really wanted to change the way our products were made, the way we cooked, the way we sourced food, we had to integrate sustainability throughout the entire company, throughout everything we did, not as a side project or a nice to have. So as Chief Strategy and Brand Officer, I oversaw marketing, communications, purchasing, culinary, wellness, and guest-facing technology. And all of those had a component of sustainability, as well as I talk about in the book, making sure that everybody in the organization is incented towards your sustainability goals. So looking at all of your systems, and something that we did very well at Bon Appetit, making sure that everybody's KPIs involved something to do with sustainability, that every hire was talked to about sustainability during the recruiting process and the onboarding, that it was truly diffused throughout the company.
That's good. Maisie, I want to continue with you. That is one question that I've seen many organizations is how to define this border between sustainability and strategy. In some organizations, you have strategy and sustainability is just a downstream activity you need to implement and you need to follow, for example, some governance or some like compliance. In some other organizations, is the opposite. You have like the mission of the organization. You need to kind of like integrate that with the strategy. In one thing that I notice in your case when I read the book and when I see you speaking is that there is not a lot of like difference between strategy and sustainability. It's like very well integrated. I would like to hear you how that happens. How do you structure that in the mind of people in the organization when you're there?
Well, that's because, as I said, our go-to market strategy was about sustainability. So it has to be at that highest level. And I think everybody on this podcast has talked about even how sustainability has become customer facing and really an important point in the economics of the company. Now, that is not true for every organization, though. There are companies that are competing as being maybe purely the low price leader. And sustainability for them becomes understandably more what is the minimum they can do to comply with regulations or to comply with customers' basic requests. And at that point, maybe sustainability doesn't sit at the highest level. Maybe it's not a chief strategy officer's role. It is somewhere further down the line because it's further down the line in priority for the organization. So I think the first question a company has to ask themselves is, do I want to be a leader in sustainability? And if I do, then it has to be a truly leadership level position. Or do I just need to check the box and make sure that we're not a laggard? And if that's the case, then maybe it is a more downstream department or position.
Love it. Love it. Paula, how is that for you as well? I mean, it looks like as you speak, it's a core element of the strategy. It means that when you think about strategy and sustainability, they are low border, it's integrated. I mean, could you discuss a little bit that?
For us, this is very natural. As I said, we are at the end of the day selling sustainability. If you want to make a very simple summary of what we're doing, right? We are, basically saying sugarcane is the best possible plant to convert solar energy into renewable carbon. And from there, you can do, whatever you want. But the point that I wanted to make is that we also have the downstream part of the business, or we also have the fuels distribution part of the business, right? And even in this place, we are seeing increasing requirements from a sustainability standpoint, from the fact that we want to promote the use of ethanol in Brazil, right? And bear in mind that in this case, there's a cultural thing, there is a marketing thing that needs to happen because the ethanol is sometimes even more competitive than gasoline in energy terms, and still not necessarily the mix responds accordingly. So there is a portion of the, fuels business that is also connected to the sustainability pitch. And then there's the other aspect of that one could think about it as more of a license to operate, as Maisie mentioned, which is the upstream, right? We produce the sugarcane and we produced it. I have, a great guy in my team that likes to say it's not enough to be renewable, it has to be sustainable. So we've been taking care of our supply chain since the inception of Raizen, way before supply chain sustainability became a hot topic, right? For instance, we buy half of the sugarcane we crush from third party, from smaller millers, and we share with them technology. We share with them our procurement platform. We share with them the best practices. So we started doing, for example, Bom Sucro, which is the highest standard of sustainability for sugarcane globally. So we had the Bom Sucro standard in our mills, but then we had to create a program to engage the producers so that they can gradually, evolve in their agricultural practices and reach the level of, the global standard. So we've been doing the two things, if you see what I mean, right? We have like the natural thing of, selling E2G globally as, a waste-based product that conveys great premium in Europe and that has a very low carbon footprint and a big advantage. So that's the kind of the easy part, right? But then we have to assure across the value chain, since the very beginning, since the farming and the planting and so on and so forth, that this is all taken care of. And then you have to build traceability, and you have to build all the governance and the checks and balances and so on and so forth to assure that your process is really sustainable. So, although there are situations where you end up having to compete for prices, or you try and be the low price producer in specific sectors, you can still assure that everything you're doing is compliant and sustainable. And to some extent, this will be a way of creating revenues. If you're a listed company, you probably have to do it because your shareholder won't be willing to touch. At some point, if you are a low pricing clothes company, for instance, what we're seeing is the new generations are even for in those cases, the new generations are far more conscious and picky on those things. So, and picky in a good sense, So I think at the end of the day, it goes across every type of business.
Alpa, coming to you, I mean, packaging. One thing that Maisie comment on her book is about the client. The client not necessarily know the whole complexity behind for example, packaging sustainable. It's so many details that they don't even imagine. So the same question: how is the border between strategy and sustainability in the case of WestRock?
Yeah. In our case, I think first and foremost, what is very interesting is that the consumer is demanding, right? So whether you're talking about our consumer in the United States or a consumer in Europe or a consumer in Brazil or a consumer in China, I think increasingly over the last 15, 20 years, we're seeing that people care more. They may not always be knowledgeable, but they care more about what they're consuming. And that goes for packaging as well. So what we have found, and maybe this is a roundabout way of answering your question, but what we have found is it's our job to make our packaging sustainable in comparison to other alternatives, right? Is it better than what else they can purchase and also sustainable in the absolute? And we have to make that easy for anyone who is buying something to say, I feel good about what I'm buying because I know this is a better option. And it's straightforward, and it's something that is transparent to them, meaning, it's not full of some technical language that they don't understand. It's not full of mystery, or it's also not greenwashing, which is really, really important these days. So our job, I think, from both a commercial sense and also from a technical sense, which then funnels ultimately to the choices we make to make this possible, which is corporate strategy, is how do you enable that, right? So we have to have our operations be as sustainable as we can make them. And that is always a journey because there's always something more you can do. And that means that you have to make the investments where they're going to drive the maximum value to achieve that next level of sustainable benefits. But then it all comes down in our business to the design and the innovation that you're putting into the packaging that you're creating. So we invest very heavily, and this is a deliberate choice. Again, going back to where do you want to put your resources as a company, a deliberate choice to invest very, very heavily in research, development, design, innovation, in partnership with our customers and other industry partners to really break down some of the barriers to how you can make packaging more sustainable. Our holy grail is to be able to do things like replace plastics, because plastics, we know, generally speaking, can be problematic, and, to reduce overpackaging where possible. So a lot of that work in our business has been over the last decade, really focused on things like lightweighting, creating barrier properties for packaging so that paper can mimic some of the properties that plastics have to prevent moisture, to, prevent oxygen saturation, those sorts of things, while at the same time delivering something that is very easy for the consumer to understand. And the benefit here is vast majority of consumers around the world generally know, hey, if I can feel good about paper because I can recycle it, it is actually being recycled at scale because there's value in that, and we reuse it in the operations. And they see that happening regularly. That is, I think, the heart of it. The basics of corporate strategy go back to, I love what Maisie said about, first of all, your company has to understand, do you want to be a leader in sustainability, and what value is it creating? Why do you want to be a leader in sustainability? Are you just trying to stay ahead of the regulators? Are you just trying to meet your supply chain's demands? That's one answer, and it could be right for some companies. But in our case, yes, those are true. But more importantly, we believe it's a differentiator for how we position our packaging versus others in the marketplace. And ultimately, it's got to be able to drive revenue and actually deliver bottom line value. And then it's also really, really important to our employee base. We have 50,000 plus employees around the world, and increasingly, one of the deciding factors as to whether or not they're loyal to our company and invested in the promise of their career within our company is, do they feel good about the work that they're doing? And that all stems around, do I work for a corporation that cares about sustainability, cares about the planet, cares about the people that it's touching every day? And that's a fundamental value.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. So one thing that I would like to hear from you is, so there are a lot of externalities happening, tornadoes, floods, but at the same time that this happen, climate denial is increasing, even in some of these places where the things happen. That's one thing. And we see some things like, for example, some states here in the US that are pushing back their investments in renewable energy, or pushing back their pension funds to invest in organizations that have sustainability intentions, let's say this way. And of course, you have a lot of clients that are moving towards sustainability, but there are a lot of others that are, because of this political division we are seeing around the world, going back, denying and, trying, some of them even avoiding buying some products that are associated with that. So I'm just bringing that, but I would love to hear from you. Which are the pressures you sense right now are happening for those that have sustainability as a core part of their strategy? And we can start with you again, Alpa. Where do you see the key tensions happening right now to companies like yours that take sustainability seriously?
Yeah, from my perspective, I would say some of the biggest challenges that we have are around staying ahead of where expectations are being created, especially by third parties around the world, right? So whether it's government-led or NGO-led expectations for what does good look like in the world of sustainability becomes a challenge. And the reason I say that is because, many of us are grappling with how to meet the demands of, for example, different legislation that's coming from the EU when things are not necessarily well defined or inconsistent. And so balancing those expectations with running your day-to-day operations and actually delivering fully transparently the progress that you're making in a sustainable world. So some of the types of things that we are grappling with today, things like CSRD, which is a reporting directive from the EU, really focuses and emphasizes this concept of double materiality. How does the world impact your operations and all of these externalities that may be taking place? But also, how does your operation impact the world around it? And really being able to quantify and somehow articulate the measures that you're taking in each one of the areas that you touch. Another is, European Packaging and Packaging Waste Reduction Directive. Very specific regulations that will be going into effect that really start to reshape expectations around packaging in the EU. Another one is EU deforestation regulation, which impacts not only people who plant and harvest trees, but also many other crops, including, I believe, crops like cacao and palm oil, and I'm trying to remember if sugarcane is included, but it may be. So, these are all types of directives that have not only implications in what and how you report, but actually have fundamental business impact on places where you may or may not make investments, trade flows, and other things that we have to stay ahead of. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have.
I think ours would be kind of, starting from where you stopped. right? So the way the regulations are designed, especially in Europe, the truth of the matter is that most of the intellectual developments until now have happened in the north, in the global north, right? So most of the metrics or most of the taxonomy or most of the calculations regarding, energy crops have been developed based on on temperate agriculture. And we are a tropical country. Sugarcane is a tropical climate culture, right? And the tropical agriculture is by definition way more efficient than, the temperate agriculture in terms of use of land, the yields, and so on and so forth. And in many situations, we see ourselves being measured in terms of the carbon footprint or the use of land based on the metrics of the global north. And this is unfair, to say the least. So even prior to discussing or qualifying some of those measurements as being protectionism, right? We are, one step behind in saying, let's do those calculations really based in science, and let's make sure the tropical climate impacting agriculture is taken into consideration. Let's recognize that, for example, here in Brazil, in the southeast, where most of our sugarcane production is located, we have the obligation to protect 20% of the land with forests, right? And even the local legislation does not allow us to take the carbon credit for, the forest protection. And instead, in Europe, one could say, I want to compare you with the, deforestation issues that you have, or use of land competing with food that you have in Europe. So that's nonsense. That needs to be taken into consideration. The other important thing has to do with green funding, if you like, or, green funding incentives into investments, green investments, right? You can spend hours and hours and hours discussing with banks, for instance, about, green bonds or green investments, and they will all say, yeah, this is very important, and we want to support, the green investments. We want to make sure that our clients do not have green wrongdoings in their portfolios, and so on and so forth. But then, when they take the case to define the interest rate or the WACC that they will discount their cash flows, it goes into the very old credit spreadsheets and credit departments, which are, at the end of the day, willing to know whether the cash flow is there in year one, or whether the business is healthy and dividends here, So they're all willing to brag about the green commitments, but not necessarily, there will be a real commitment in saying, okay, I'm going to give you 20 bips rebate in your interest rate so that you can, move forward competitively with your investments in our case, biofuels and things like that. So this is the second thing. And then the third thing, I think, has a lot to do with the customer, right? Or with the willingness to pay for, and I'm going to call it sustainable attribute, because it's not only, carbon emissions, it's really the sustainable attribute, right? So everyone wants to buy something greener or something that is sustainably developed, but not necessarily one is willing to pay the price. And we all have to be careful with what we say and impacts in global inflation and other things, right? But there must be a balance also from a customer standpoint, right? In being able to really value the type of product differentiation that we are discussing here. So again, three important elements, the funding incentive, the client incentive, and then the proper recognition.
So you see that there is still an opportunity to kind of correct cost the incentives in the whole environment. It could be for clients, it could be for investments, to kind of like push forward the green products, the green technology, so on and so forth. Is that correct, Larissa?
Rationally speaking, I'm not talking about blind investments or, huge subsidies. I think we need, a regulatory framework with targets and clear definitions, and then, the adjustments. Some countries like the US will have huge budgets to deploy, like the IRA, or Europe will have a Green Deal. This is not the same thing that will happen in a country like Brazil or India, and so we need to find the ways to fund those developments, and we need to find that balance. Otherwise, it's impossible. It's not the Brazilian priority, when you think about the socioeconomic issues that we have here, and the fact that we have the Amazon, and so we need to protect the Amazon indeed, right? But there's other things that we might have to do prior to, for instance, decarbonizing a certain industry, because our energy matrix is already better than most of the countries around the world.
That's correct. So let me go to you, Maisie. Get back this topic that you mentioned in your book, that many times the clients are not that conscious about the whole impact they are causing, just because the things are very complex out there, to produce packaging, in your case, like the whole process to get the food in front of them. There is so many things. And I love like the example you use in your book. And I want to get that together with your perception about the pressures out there, because in your case, it looks like from the beginning of your story, it looks like the pressure was internal. It was your organization, your leader, yourself, putting pressure to change because you believe that something should be different. So just to try to get you in this conversation as well.
Yeah, Paula left off with talking about the customer, and I'll start there. We Bon Appetit Management Company, we're a U.S.-based company with only operations in the U.S., so a little bit of a different perspective than where Paula and Alpa are playing on a global scale. But you mentioned in your original question, you talked about the division and climate deniers, and how does that play out in terms of corporate strategy. When we made the decision to really focus on sustainability, we knew that was going to not sit well with every single potential customer. In fact, in 2007, when we rolled out our first, what we called the low carbon diet, and we're the first company to talk about the connection between food and climate change at a restaurant level, we did get some pushback from people who said that it was a partisan issue, or we had one email that said we were catering to the idiot elite. And if you're going to take a stand, you need to be okay with that type of criticism. Our CEO and founder, Fidel Baccio, was a very visionary man who had reinvented the food service industry once already by bringing real chefs into the kitchens of institutional food service. And he did it again when we put sustainability at the heart of what we did. Now, he also knew that we weren't the right company for every single customer, that we had to partner with companies, with corporations, with colleges that also shared these values. And we found that the swath of people that care about sustainability is actually very wide. We just may come at it from different perspectives. For example, in the Midwest in the United States, there was a lot of concern about ensuring the viability of a rural way of life. So our local purchasing commitments really were attractive to those Midwest clients that understood what a small farm community was like and the economic forces that were going against them at that time, really. Where maybe in California, there was more focus on soil health and around the environmental benefits. You both get to an interest in local purchasing and supporting local farmers that are raising more sustainable crops, but you get at it from a different perspective. What we were willing to compromise was how we marketed and talked about our sustainability commitments, but not the commitments themselves. And I think that's a really important distinction, because at the end of the day, does it really matter what the poster says? Alpa talked about greenwashing. We really don't want to greenwash. And in fact, sometimes we're not going to even talk about what we're doing publicly if we don't think it's going to resonate with that particular customer. But we're not going to change the way that we source, the way we run our kitchens. Those are the non-negotiables. So we navigated some of the division, both in how we marketed and also how we selected our customers. That was part of the road to success. And as you said, through internal leadership, having a visionary CEO that really stood behind these issues. I would often go to conferences and people would say, how do you prove out the ROI? And I would say, my CEO's never asked me to prove out the ROI. But if we had to, we would talk about sustainability as a revenue driver, not merely about the costs, but about how it actually creates economic value. In our business, we talk about customers' frequency, how often they dine with us, and average check, how much they would spend with us each dining occasion. And we strongly believe that people would come to us more often and they would buy more from us if it aligned with their values, if the food they were eating was serving a larger purpose. And therefore, it's a revenue driver, not just talking about cost containment.
No, thank you. That's brilliant. Going towards the end of the session here, I mean, suppose that you have a new CSO, a new Chief Strategy Officer, that also has the responsibility for sustainability, and the person is lost, and he wants to start. What would be your recommendation? How do you start with that?
Well, I would start as a new CSO, interviewing the top level stakeholders as well as people throughout the organization. Alpa talked about how important sustainability is to employees, and Paula talked about how important it is to customers. Alpa did as well. So I would start with interviews and I would ask two sets of questions. One based on how do they define sustainability? Because it's a broad word that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So really honing in on what do they think sustainability is? Is it purely carbon emissions? Does it range into social issues as well as environmental? So first defining sustainability and then prioritizing within an organization. How important is it? And each of those attributes, how important it is. So I would start with doing kind of a needs assessment for my organization. And then I would find some great NGO partners who are experts in those areas that arise as being the highest priority, because they're going to be the ones that are driving what's being asked of you. So you want to understand where their priorities are as well. And they're also going to have deep expertise, hopefully from a science perspective, to also educate you. So those are my first steps as a new CSO.
You say in your book that you should listen to the customers and the socialists. Is that correct?
I think that you should listen to the fringiest group that interacts with your product. So your most extreme customers and the most extreme critics, because that is where the future is going. Maybe not as far out or as fast as they're asking you to get to, but that's your kind of directional indicator. So yes, go out. College students are a great place to hear about what's going to be hot in the next 5 or so years. They're not constrained with reality in often cases. They just dream big, and they're not afraid to boldly ask for corporations to make big change. Reality is not a strong component to their ask. So it's a great place to start to learn.
Love it. Yeah. Alpa, I know it's your second role in strategy and sustainability, like combined. I'd love to hear from you. I mean, what would you recommend the CSO taking over sustainability in a new job?
Yeah, no, this is such a good question. And I love what you are laying out, Maisie, which is really all about understanding the role that sustainability plays for that company and then figuring out where to focus. In addition to identifying where to focus, it's very important, I think, to start to articulate a way of inspiring action against that focus area. So how do you articulate the importance of the work itself? How do you get alignment with the stakeholders inside of your organization and across the value chain, the ecosystem that you're operating in, so that it's not just focus on paper, but it's actually focus and action? And then once that starts happening, I feel that you start to get some momentum, and then it starts to become a flywheel that is operational. But that first piece takes a lot of pushing, right? So figuring out how to articulate that inspiration around focus, and then making sure that it's something that you're focusing and driving every single day will get to the action and the outcomes that then people start to take ownership for. People become proud of the results that they're getting, and then that starts to create, some momentum.
Without disagreeing, actually the opposite with everything they both said, I would like to add a little bit of a pragmatic approach to the story. And I think this is probably part of the success that we had both at Cosan and then at Raizen, because at the very end of the day, for a company to be sustainable, right, it has to have the right balances in all matters. And that does include, the economics in the long-term sustainability of the business, right? So I think probably like most of the other elements that were considered, tools for management back in the day, starting with finance and then quality and then, understanding innovation and understanding technology. I think sustainability becomes another element of the broad formation of a leader, right? So, to start with, I think having an isolated sustainability department, it's probably the biggest mistake that a company can do these days, right? Sustainability has to be embedded, has to be very much part of, the core business, the marketing, the customer value proposition, the employee value proposition. Because at the end of the day, if you go to the same college students that you mentioned as, good sources of the future view about sustainability, none of them will be willing to work for a company that does not consider those things into the future. The challenge to me is understanding that this is not NGO business. This is not idealism. This is not pure academics. This is actually the companies that are successful in the future are the companies that will have, embedded and considered those elements in everything they do. Because again, if you think about the future, the kids are willing to buy healthy food. The kids are willing to buy greener products. The kids are, unwilling to buy maybe the plastic bottle that ends up in the sea killing the fishes. And therefore, the paper makes more sense because it is renewable. So at the end of the day, I think making sure sustainability is considered as one more business fundamental is what will make the new CSO guy successful, because any type of isolation would be a big mistake. And then looking into the longer term, right? My dream or my definition of success is when sustainability is no longer a subject, because this is when it is really part of, the day-to-day and the real thing. So it's when it becomes a non-subject. And I hear my kids at home, they hear me talking about, renewables and decarbonization and so on and so forth. And sometimes they look at me and they say, why are you discussing this? This is so obvious. So that's the point that I want to be. When this is so obvious that we don't need to spend time discussing it, it's 100% embedded.
No, I love that. I mean, we are leading with a pragmatic issue, a pragmatic opportunity for the world, actually. Thank you so much, Paula, for that. So thank you all. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Maisie. Thank you, Alpa, for coming here today. For all those that are listening to the session today, thank you so much. I hope you get some inspiration for this conversation. I hope that can influence your decisions about sustainability. And I hope to see you soon in another Chief Strategy Officer podcast. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Chief Strategy Officer podcast. To join our community of strategy leaders, visit outthinkernetwork.com/apply. Until next time, let's keep the conversation going and rewrite the future of strategy together.